backyard Barbies to volunteer halls. You can hear that spirit in the weekend calls. Doesn't take gold, just a soul that cares. They're doing good stuff everywhere.
It's Artificial and the Intelligence introducing our segment called Doing Good Stuff with a song that they cleverly called Doing Good Stuff. Rob, we do this because we like to talk to people who are doing good stuff. Who have we got on the top of device today?
We do love this, and a gentleman who is new to us, but his organisation's not. I had the privilege of attending a function at the Birregurra Football Club, which I'm also going to today, with Scott Ango from an organisation called SALT. And I love what they do because, Neil, they're doing good stuff.
Are they?
And I tried to get Scott on the show today, and he said, look, I'm unavailable, I've got daddy stuff to do, but he said, I know someone who can help. Why not go to the man that made SALT happen? His name's David Burt. David, good morning and welcome to the Two Blokes Chatting radio show.
Good morning, Rob. Thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure. Your organisation, I like what they do. Neil and I have spent a lot of time on this show talking about mental health, well-being, stuff in community, and both of us are heavily involved in sporting clubs, and we know that it's a great place to come for young people to develop character, parents to have a safe place to bring their families to develop community, but it's also a really good place to send messages of support, and your organisation does that very well. But tell me, how did it all start?
Well, if we go all the way back, a long time back, growing up, and you know, I'm 64 years of age, so...
Can I just comment that that's very, very, very young, and you are in your prime, Dave? That just observing.
I feel like I'm in my prime. We're only just getting...
Aren't we, though? Aren't we?
Yeah, being a teenager back in the 70s and playing cricket and footy, the cricket club in particular for me was just my real happy place. And yet there were certain expectations, I guess, around drinking and masculinity, and it was a very sort of male-dominated place, which I kind of enjoyed, but looking back I also realised there were some factors about it that I just felt like you had to drink heavily, you had to, you know, sometimes speak in a sort of sexualised way about women, and it was a great place, but looking back as an adult and when my kids were ready to start playing sport, I thought there were some things about sporting clubs culturally that we could question, because as you said in the introduction, these are wonderful places where people want to be, where there's cross-generational support, where potentially if you've got a problem, there's somebody there a little bit older and wiser that you can talk to. But I felt that particularly many clubs were too focused on winning and talent squads, and kids were dropping out at a time when they most needed to be there, that sort of 15 to 25 age group where they could get that input. And I had a lecturer. I became a phys ed teacher, but while I was studying, David Parkin, the great Carlton coach, was my lecturer. And at that stage, he was coaching Carlton to premierships, 1981 and 1982. And being a Carlton tragic, I would sit in the front row and listen intently to everything he had to say. And he said to us, as phys ed teachers, your job is not about sport. Your job is about people, and sport is your vehicle for reaching people. So I was a school teacher for 30 years and a counsellor for a lot of that time as well. And but always kept that in mind, that it was never about the subject or the sport, it was always about the person. And then I was at Eastern Rangers in the TAC Cup helping out with the welfare there. And the talent manager was a guy called Anthony Parkin. And I said, "You're not related to David, are you?" And he said, "Yes, he's my dad." And I said, "Oh, I'd love to meet him sometime." So he took me down to reconnect with David. And I said, "You won't remember me, but you taught me back in the 80s. And he said, "No, I remember you." And he recalled a whole lot of things that he remembered about me. And I realised that those words that he'd said back then were really true. He was so invested, and I know he's a friend of your radio station, but I started working with the boys, and typically 3 or 4 of them would get drafted each year. This was the TAC Cup, as it was called back then. But there'd be 42 boys or so in the program who'd go back to local footy, and they were never quite the same versions of themselves. They'd put so much emphasis upon their football ability that when they didn't make it to the highest grade, often they fell from a great height, and they went back to local footy, and instead of being really professional and disciplined, they started drinking a lot, or they just left footy altogether because it wasn't the same quality. And I wanted to start writing some programs for these boys that helped them to put footy into perspective in regard to everything else, and to utilise the skills and strengths they were developing, the resilience and the character and the good communication under pressure, etc., and take those strengths and apply them to life. And so some of the feeder clubs into the Eastern Ranges heard about the courses that we were doing, and asked if I could start doing those courses in their clubs, which I did, and it kind of just grew from there. But if you've got time, I'll tell you one more aspect, and I know I'm chatting a lot, but you're letting me do so thank you. During a period of 18 months, I worked with 7 clubs who had suicides in their clubs, and I'm sorry to bring that up as a theme, but it was very much at the heart of starting Solve. And basically, at every club I went to, I heard a similar message, and that was that we never saw it coming. And after a club lost somebody who they loved in such tragic circumstances, their whole focus as to why their club existed changed, and they became very connected, very caring, very vulnerable. They opened up and said things which they probably hadn't said before, and it created a new environment within that club that I thought, could we replicate this without there having to be a tragedy to preempt it? And so again, we started SALT as a charity doing education around wellbeing and mental health and healthy masculinity and positive sports parenting and a whole range of other things which we do now, which people can look up if they have a look at the website.
So I think one of the things too, David, it's Neil here, by the way, that when I recently visited the Matoa Football and Netball Club, and I think one of the things I find in regional clubs like that, 2 towns that have merged their football club together, total 1,200 people between the 2 towns, because it's a football and netball club. Therefore, on a Thursday night, you haven't got a whole stack of young blokes getting together. You've got a whole stack of young people getting together. And I think that edge of masculinity is just toned down a little bit by the inclusion of the netballers and, of course, female footballers.
Yeah, hi, Neil. You are so very right. And, of course, country sporting clubs have a unique role to play, don't they? Because often they are the real hub of the community. There's not that many other places that people can go to. And when we go out and do sessions in these beautiful country clubs, and there's men and women together, and people bring casseroles and they put advertising material out into the country town, and others come in because this is such an important place for them, that sense of community is really magnified. Sometimes still there's a real divide. The men do this, the women do that, and in some clubs the idea is that it should always be that way. And that can be challenged, but most definitely any club that's moving towards resembling more of what a family looks like, men, women, children, people of different ages, playing their roles, complementing each other, respecting and regarding each other's contributions, that creates really healthy clubs.
I think the other community thing that they do too, that the warm down for the senior men is they get rubbish bags and walk around where the crowd has been and pick up the rubbish. I just think that is a spectacular thing to do.
It's an extraordinary thing to do, and if you think back to the All Blacks, and there was a book called Clean the Sheds, I think, and the most successful team in world sport would do the same. They would pick up after themselves and make sure that nobody else had to do that. It's called Sweep the Sheds, I think. And as a philosophy, that sense of humility in serving others. We've seen countless examples, if we look at high-level sport, of when clubs have got that aspect right, their performance increases exponentially to that. So, these days, sport is far greater at understanding the role of character and respect and care for others.
There is more good stuff happening in the space, and in this Geelong region we've had for many years an organisation called Read the Play, which does some great work with local clubs. But having seen your organisation's presentation, I must shout out to Scott Angove, who does a wonderful, wonderful job delivering your program. So a tick to him and what you've set up, Dave. But it is a great thing, and it's a great environment at a time where we really need to spend a bit of focus on so many of these social issues. So good on you, mate, for starting off good stuff. And I reckon I might keep in touch and we'll chat to you a little bit more.
Well, Neil and Rob, thank you. Really appreciate that. We've got some facilitators down in Geelong. You might recall a girl called Tegan Phillips played netball for Australia. She was
A friend of the show as well.
Yeah.
Yes, and a guy called Brad Clark, you might know. He runs one of the cricket clubs down there, and he's one of our facilitators. So if anybody is interested in having a session out in Geelong, let us know. And just before I go, I will mention that we're also doing what's called tragedy and trauma support work, and it's completely free. If a club has a tragedy or a trauma, they lose somebody who they love, we'll come in and with a clear head and a warm heart and just help the club move forward through that.
What's your website, Dave?
Just look up sportandlifetraining.com.au, not SALT, because you'll get a picture of white powder, but Sport and Life Training.
Sports or sport?
Sport, sport singular.
Sport and Life Training. Thank you, Dave, for your time this morning. And you know what I reckon, Rob? I reckon he's doing good stuff.
I'm damn sure he is. Thanks, Dave. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Rob and Neil. See you.
Best wishes.
David Burt from SALT, Sport and Life Training.